Harley Lippman, political analyst and foreign policy expert. Shalom.
Shalom.
So Trump won and he's on his way to the White House. You weren't surprised.
Well, I was recently on Fox and I more or less did predict this. I think that what surprised, I think most everybody, is the extent of his victory because everybody said it would be neck and neck. Some thought that Trump would really kill it, which he did. But it's a telling statement about what enough people feel about America and where it should go, and that's what's significant.
What gave him the victory? Is it economy, immigration, family values, anti-woke agendas, maybe his personal style? What was it?
Well, it's a combination of all the above, but if I were to list them in order of priority, polling evidence shows the economy was number one, that approximately 4 out of 10 voters identified it as their main issue. After that was, which is related, of course, is inflation. Right after that comes immigration. And those are, abortion is maybe 1 in 10. It's a distant, maybe fifth item of concern. And concerns about our democracy was another major concern for those people who voted Democratic. But I think in the bigger picture, what happened here? Why did it surprise so many people that Trump did so well and/or that Kamala Harris did so poorly? I think, when you look at how people vote, people often ignore the psychological factors because they're hard to get your hand around. They're very hard to measure. So what do I mean by that? One, Kamala Harris is a Black woman. Was there, how much was misogyny at play, if at all? It's hard to know. When people go into that voting booth, they have that privacy. But I do think for sure what happened is there's a feeling that she didn't really earn it. I think Americans are all about that. Trump, whether you like them or not, enough people felt he's gritty, he fights for it, he's been indicted, convicted. He's earned it, so to speak. He's been in the trenches. Where Kamala Harris, as we all know, did not have a competitive race to be the president of the United States. Trump kept on reminding us about that, but enough people, doesn't have to be that many, but enough people feel, they don't want to ordain someone. It's something like Hillary Clinton. One major factor why she lost is Americans don't believe in dynasties. Same reason why Jeb Bush, the brother of George Bush, who everybody thought was arguably the most talented and brightest of the Bushes, he never got the presidential nominee of the Republican Party because people felt, they don't like dynasties. Americans are about real people who are flawed, and as people will see in Donald Trump. So I think these factors are at play. Also, I think people are overwhelmingly concerned about the direction of the country. I think all these student demonstrations, like the Vietnam War, you saw hundreds of thousands of people demonstrating in the United States against the war. But in 1972, who won that election? A conservative Republican, Richard Nixon. So there's a reaction among the average American when they see disorder in the streets, when they see young people taking a side with Hamas that many people feel is just not right, even if they're not so pro-Israeli, when they see Hamas as being a terrorist organization, to see students somehow being aligned with that, I think shakes up a lot of Americans.
Here in Israel, many were hoping that he would win. But now people are asking, is he really 100% with us? Are the Israeli agendas now going to be part of Washington policy?
Well, again, President Trump is going to fulfill the American agenda. But the American agenda ought to be pro-Israeli because Israel is an extremely important and reliable friend of the United States. We're aligned with democratic values. It's a strategic partner in many ways, in intelligence and military initiatives and all kinds of arena economically. So the administration in the United States ought to be logically pro-Israeli. Kamala Harris and her supporters would argue and say she's pro-Israeli, but then you have to define what that means. It's like in Israel, you have, Ben Gvir who's pro-Israeli, and you have, Benny Gantz, but they have very different visions of what being pro-Israel is. So it's the same thing here. But to your question, yes, there's always a concern. Now he's president. He can be somewhat unpredictable. But I think overwhelmingly, the Israeli people will welcome him as president because I think he will have Israel's back. He clearly understands that the threat to violence and war and anti-Americanism is coming from Iran. As Israel knows, I mean, you wouldn't have had October 7th if it wasn't for Iran. Who trained Hamas? Who armed them? Who guided them? Same thing with Hezbollah. It all comes from Iran. So Trump is very much against the regime in Iran. That regime has tried to assassinate President Trump and some of his former senior officials. Remember, when he was president, he had strict sanctions against Iran. So I think Israel could feel very comfortable with the fact that President Trump is now the next president, and that he will allow Israel to do what it needs to do. Remember, a big distinction in the campaign was that Biden and Kamala Harris would not let Israel bomb Iran's nuclear reactors. They thought that it would, in their view, allow escalation of violence in the region and bring on a whole regional war, perhaps. That was their view. Whereas Trump sees that, Iran will use those weapons. You can't take that risk. And that's a huge point because a lot of people have always dismissed or not acknowledged the real threat from Iran. I think if a year ago, you and I were to say to people, Iran's going to fire hundreds of ballistic missiles into Israel, people would have thought I was delusional. So it's a really telling sign that when enemies tell you they're going to do something, believe them. They do it. And especially for Jews and Jewish history, when bad people say they're going to do bad things to Jews, they do them. So it's like Hamas, and I define that as arrogance. When you think you know better what your enemy means than your enemy's own words, that's arrogance. And Israel was guilty of that in relation to Hamas and underestimated them.
Okay, Harley Lippman, thank you very much for joining us, and see you soon in Israel.
See you in Israel soon, I hope.